Okay, well, here we are with Tom's third in a row Fender Meteora, Player Plus Meteora HH. First one they bought. Now this is a young lad who saved up his own money to buy this quality guitar. Retail RRP pricey, 999, probably cheaper somewhere else, but that's a sort of round the price point. First one that they got, the frets were a right state and they weren't happy with them, so they got an exchange. Sent the exchange direct to me, and I took some careful pictures and whatnot and evaluated it, and there were a number of little problems, including a chip off the side of the fingerboard and the fact that the jack wouldn't even go in the plug. Anyway, so that went back, and this is the third of three, and you know, it's cost the, I'm not going to say who the retailer was, but it's cost somewhere along the line Fender and or the retailer a lot of hassle to have this sent back so many times. Now the thing about this guitar is that it's a lovely shape. If you like the offset thingies, I mean, it is beautiful shape. So gorgeous looking thingy. Two of these, what do they call them? Wide range humbuckers. It's got a coil split S1 button or something they call it inside the pot there, knob I should say. 3-position switch, and you know, a nice quite chunky neck. Oh god, no, not another thing. He's just found something on the back of his neck. Hold on a sec. It's the edge of the skunk strip. It's not a big deal, but I can feel it. Anyway, the problem on the other one, well, a kind of general problem with these guitars, I don't know if you can see this, but yeah, see that golden hue down on some of the frets, yeah? So they are, I've just got a text in from Adam saying Grace is wonderful. How nice is that? This is Grace, who went missing for a week courtesy of Parcel Force, but to their credit, they found her and got her to Adam, and that's all I really care about. And the fact that he likes it and loves the guitar is even icing on the cake for me. Anyway, so yeah, you can see that the way they do these frets is they install them and then they spray over them, and it's a sort of quick, straightforward way of finishing. And what they do, it's clear in this factory, is that they make a decision to level the frets with, I would suggest, a radius block. And I don't know how well you can see that, but you can see that fret all the way across. It's a bit flat. And actually, in looking closely at these guitars, I'm noticing that look at the ends get an extra bit of a hit to take care of what is often the you know, a likelihood of the frets getting, or there being a bit of fret slap at the end there. But you see that? So they're all, that's actually quite significant fret leveling. And this, I know for a fact, this is the thing that upset Tom and his dad James the first time, which is how much have these been leveled in order to get this? Now, it's an interesting one because in the olden days, people would send out these guitars without this fret leveling done, the factory fret leveling, as I would call it, or put another way, the radius block leveling. And without it, the owner would get the guitar home and they would plug it in and try and play it and discover that it had a very high action, typically had a pretty high action. And then with its high action, where's my amplifier? I'm just sort of going over there. With that high action, the owner would try and set the action a bit lower, and then suddenly, before you know it, they would be hitting buzz, and it would be an unsatisfactory experience. So, and then, you know, you'd have people in forums talking about a guitar, and then you'd continually hear people saying, what about such and such guitar? And they go, yeah, but the action's really high, and then when you drop the action, it buzzes all over the place, and I'm not happy. And so, quite understandably, the manufacturer thought, why don't we take care of this in the factory? And what they've done is, rather than do a proper fret leveling, doesn't matter about which size it is. They've got their version of a radius block with sandpaper on it, and they've gone up and down the fingerboard, and that's a pretty quick way of getting the frets leveled. And then I think what they've done after that is they've done it with very fine paper, not rough grit like that one. And then they've gone and put it up to the buffer. So they've done a couple of useful things. They've taken the golden amber finish off the top of the fret, which they need to do, otherwise it would be kind of crumbling off in somebody's hands. So they get rid of that, and they level the frets at the same time, and then they push the whole lot against the buffer and go, and then the thing comes out looking kind of shiny. Now, that's a choice, and obviously it's an economic one, but it's based on the I suppose what you call the bottom line, isn't it? You know, they're trying to get things out and minimize the cost of sale, and so they take out as much as they can. Anyway, that's how they do it, and so whether you think that's good or not, I don't particularly. It leaves all that stuff still on the frets. We're going to need to re-crown these frets first of all, because they're flattened. So Tom, I'll show you on this. This is old hat to some people on the channel here, but FYI, Tom, in case it's sort of a new concept, if you think about a high fret sitting on the deck there like that, and it's perhaps too high, what the leveling process does is it comes along and it takes off, as you can see on those frets, as much as is required to level the fret off. And so this bit that it gets gets rid of, this bit here, right? Then we have a nice, we have the perfect level. It's always bad drawing with one hand. Well, you only draw with one hand, but leaning forward past the camera. So that's the look of your fret. Now the point about the fret is, ideally, technically for it to play in tune, you need the string to sit at the top center of the fret. So its contact point, first of all, does not want to be flat, but it also wants to be at the center. And if the string sits across this flattened surface here, what you'll get is there's the string, and rather than the intonation point, i.e. the start of the note being in the dead center, it will gravitate forward to this front point here. And that can be as much as a total, you know, not difficult, it can be a millimetre or more, which is you know, you can have up to a millimetre shift. In this case it's probably about half a mil either side, but it's pushing the intonation point off the centre where you want it, if the bridge is down here, and it's pushing it towards the bridge. So you don't want that. So what you really want to do, and this is what they don't do in the factory, is once you've levelled it, you certainly want to do the levelling, of course, and the next thing you want to do, as all good guitar techs will tell you, is you want to re-crown the frets. And the reason you re-crown the frets is you want to keep this point here the exact same height. So what you do is you get a file and you carefully, sorry, it's terrible, I can't keep my hands still, you reshape the fret so it comes back out like a good old-fashioned arch, right, because we want the string to sit at the top there, as it does at the top of an arch, so it's not a flat spot. And you can see that that all took place within the existing fret material, but if you see, we took a bit of material off the edges there and off the edges there where the flat spots were, and that repositions the intonation point in the center, but it also makes sure that we don't lower it any more, so that the leveling that we got, and they got with the radius block in this case in the factory, is retained. But the problem is, as we see, what they've done is in the factory they've gone down with the radius block, they've done that. It's exaggerated, I know. They've done that and they've left it, and then they've buffed it with a wheel, which gives it a nice shine. So if you only had 30 seconds or a minute or two to do something to the guitar to make it that tiny bit better than it used to be, then I do say in favour of the company, the manufacturer, that's not a bad thing to do. That's a good use of time, because at least that leveling will give me a chance to set a different action when I get the guitar, and that's a big deal. That will go quite a long way towards, you know, keeping somebody happy with that. But it's for £1,000. You're kind of wondering whether, you know, it's the right level of detail. Now what I'm doing is I'm just going to kind of go through. I'm going to plug it in, and I don't often do this because my playing is, as usually, pretty uninspired. It's unskilled and uninspired. And I people go, "Oh, you're good at it." I'm not that good at it, and I never think of anything to play. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug it in, and now straight out of a box, I never understood this as well from a company. Really, out of the box, you want the guitar to impress the most it can. So this thing, first of all, won't stay in tune, but that's probably because the strings aren't stretched out, and the you know the apologists for any company will say, "Well, come on, man, you know that's the bit you do when you get it home," and they'll say things like, "Doesn't every guitarist put their own brand of oh Jesus, that's coming out of the locking thing. That's not even going to stay in tune." Oh, what's going on? I'm pressing the wrong one. That's going to come out in a minute. So it's notwithstanding the stretching. So straight out of the box, why isn't it stretched out? You know, it's not the biggest thing in the world. So I'm just going to try and tune it now. So bear with me. Okay, where are we? Oh, G, A. Okay, so as you're out of the box, you've got a tremolo bridge with two posts. So it's not a 6-screw classic one; it's a 2-poster. So you think to yourself, okay, I'm just going to tune the guitar up and play it. You've spent your £1,000, and you're excited. And then you go, right, tune the bottom E up. You go back up again, you think, hang on, I'm having to do all this again. I just tuned it. And so you think, right, that's it tuned. Okay. And you think, okay, I got my guitar tuned finally. Ooh, sharp. Okay, so yeah, playing, everything's working. I can't remember what we got. One tone. Okay, that'll be pickups. Neck, tone, bridge tone. Okay, so that's interesting. So 2 tones, neck and bridge, master volume, coil split. So it's a really sharp, trebly sound for a humbucker. Got a lot of top end, but you've got a lot of chance to tame the trebles, which is great. So I'm not complaining about that. It's just a different feel to it than other guitars. Well, why not if you've bought another guitar, different guitar? So, okay, that's not so bad. Now, what have I got? Oh, look, in the tremolo department, I've got the tremolo is canted up at the back now. So you suddenly realise That's why it's been difficult to tune, because it's giving me both directions, a bit of up and down. So a little tip is, if you ever see, as you're tuning, if you notice your bridge going up at the back, it means that the default setting on this from the factory is with a little bit of float. In other words, it's not hard against the deck. Now the advantage of floating is that you get a bit of pull. So you've got about a tone on the G string, a semitone on the, well, somewhere in between. So it's a funny range. I've seen people, or often I've seen people set it to a tone and a half on the G, a tone on the B, and a semitone on the E. But since it doesn't do it in tune with each other anyway, the range of up bend is different. So, okay. So the key thing is, when you find it with a tilt up at the back, you know it's been default set, or now that's either deliberate or it's just casual, careless. If you don't want the float, the back stuff, the disadvantage of the float is that you have to work a lot harder to tune it, because until it's reached equilibrium, it's not going to stabilize. So now we've gone sharp on the E, sharp on the A, on the D, sharp on the G, sharp on the B. Now at this point as well, if there's any issue with your nut slots, they will also go a long way to helping your tremolo to appear to go out of tune. It's usually the nut slots or the stretch in the strings that put the tremolo out of tune, or makes it appear the tremolo's out of tune, or putting it out of tune. A bit of rattle, but we don't know if we've got any locking business in there. I don't want to yank it all the way around, but I prefer not to have that rattle in there. We can come all the way around, but that will be a bit stiff. It's personally why I like the Wilkinson, and others, but mainly Wilkinson, that has a little adjuster screw. Maybe this one does. I haven't had a look under in the back there, so could do without the rattle. Anyway, I remember that. Black keys. Yeah, so okay, everything's working as it should. Now, having stretched it a little bit, that's now staying in tune reasonably well. There's the tiniest ping I've heard in the nuts. The problem you'll notice, if it's not returning to tune, you can use the tremolo. There's a ping there, and again that could be from the string tree, but let's just check the tuning. Just give it a quick verdict. On the E, on the B, flat on the G, so that's probably to do with the ping. Flat on the D, on the A, and on the E. So that's pretty good, actually. I'm impressed. That's bright for a neck pickup. You've got a lot of tone control in the middle. See, I'm quite happy with that. If you're going to have tone control, my verdict would be at least give it something to do or make it effective, which this is. So they've built in a very wide range. What do they call them? Wide range pickups? I don't know. But they've definitely built in a lot of tonal control, which, yeah, is a good idea. Okay, so the thing works, which is great. It holds tune better than I thought. It would hold tune slightly better again if the strings were fully stretched out, which we'll do afterwards. Here's another tip. If you want to be able to fully stretch your strings, and I suggest you do because that's a way of guaranteeing far better tuning stability, this thing of pushing them straight through, look, with almost no coil around the thing, is going to make it very difficult to stretch them. They're likely to break. So in order to benefit from the stretching, the ability to stretch and therefore stabilize your tuning, I put about a centimetre's worth of slack around this post. That way the post itself takes most of the pull when you're detuning or when you're stretching to detune, instead of putting the pressure more or less on the crimped point, which this tends to do. So I don't like the straight through. The other thing about the straight through, Tom, if you're thinking about when you're changing the strings in future, I know it's tempting to push the string all the way through, clamp it off, tiny bit of tuning, and away you go. The problem with that is if for some reason you have to take the string or slack the string off to do something else, or change a pickup or fix something, or take a saddle off and polish it up or whatever, without that extra centimetre of string, what will happen is the first time you slack this off and try and do it back up, it's going to stress the crimped point, and it's liable to break once you've done that. And that can be a real pain, like if you're setting up like this and you wanted the ability to take the strings, loosen them off, put them, tighten them back up. You're in a real problem, because before you know it, and it may well be the case in a minute when I show you, when I come to mark up the frets for leveling, you find it will very easily break. So putting an extra centimetre around this post is still a minimal amount of string, but it gives you the ability to pull and tune, detune, take all the slack out of the string, but it also allows you to slack the string off enough so you can take the string off to the side without it automatically breaking on the crimp. Because the second time you do it, you basically push the string through past the crimped bit and lock it off again. Now you only get that one chance at it, but it's better than having no chances, as you will see when this probably breaks when I come to mark up the frets and do the fret leveling. Now, I don't know if you heard, I'm going to put my microphone down here. It made a pinging noise. Now, that could be the mixture of the string tree here and or the nut, in which case it would be good to check the height of the first fret action and then widen it just slightly, or tweak it so it's the right height, but also at the same time widen it if necessary. It's already starting out as I don't know what the material is. I think it's either Corian or Tusk. I think it's Tusk to begin with. Can't remember the spec from last time. So what I will do is I'll go on the "it ain't broke, don't fix it" approach with this one. It's also been colour lacquered in place, so we'd have to sort of extract it and cut it out. So let's see if we can do the "ain't broke, don't fix" business. So what we're going to do with this, we're going to look at the action, we're going to lower the action, we're going to level the frets to make them play as well as they can, but actually almost more to iron out or recrown them and make that intonation point go back to the center. And also in the polishing out, I'll be able to, sorry you can't see that, in the polishing out I'll be able to remove all the yellow stuff going up the side. Now you might think that it would be easy to get a blade in there and cut it out. You can do, but it's incredibly easy to cut the finish, so I would rather leave it to the majority of it to the sandpaper a bit later on. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a couple of checks. We're going to check first of all the neck relief on this thing. So I'm going to do that by holding down the low E at the first and the last fret, and I'm going to just gauge the height or the amount of space between the bottom of the string and the middle fret, which is usually about the 7th or 8th. No, what's that one? 7th or 8th, yeah. Halfway between the 2 points. And that's actually quite a lot. I could measure it. I don't really feel the need to. So what I will do is I'm just going to flatten the neck a little tiny bit more with the supplied hex key, since it's supplied. And we've got an adjusting one here. One for the truss rod and one for the bridge. Okay, so adjusting the truss rod. Again, Tom, I'm going to just rabbit on at you as if this was new, but forgive me if you already know this stuff, or if your dad's already kind of drilled it into you or whatever. But in case anyone's watching and it's brand new, first rule is don't be afraid of adjusting your truss rod. The purpose of the truss rod is not primarily to adjust the action. All right. Now, having said that, it does create a change in the playing action that you will feel. But if you wanted to change, if you played your guitar and you wanted first and foremost a lowering of the action, your best bet would be to look at the what I call the first fret action, the nut slot's height, and the last fret action, which is the bridge settings. So that's where your primary place. But of course, the shape of the neck underneath that, if it's very curved or relieved, it'll feel higher here because there's more space, which there currently is about, I don't know, 0.5 mil or a bit more. If it's much flatter, this will feel like a lower action because technically in the middle it will. But because it's a curve, you'll feel it more. The action will appear to deepen in the middle and then flatten out as you get to either end. So I would recommend that you don't think about changing your action, your playing action, first and foremost by adjusting the truss rod. The thing you want to adjust the truss rod for, and its purpose, its primary purpose, is to control the curvature of your neck. So the question is how much curvature do you need? And the answer is, depending on how level your frets are, very little. So I always say a tiny bit more than none as a start point. And people get freaked out because they're kind of worried about, well, where's the numbers and what's the Fender spec and so forth and so on. The whole point about the amount of curvature you have in your neck is it's a purely subjective thing. I'm telling you what the consequences are of tweaking this. If you tighten it up, you'll flatten the neck and the action will feel pound for pound for the same height at either end. When you flatten the neck, the action will feel a little bit lower in the middle, feel faster and lower. If you counterclockwise slacken the truss rod, you will create more curvature, or the strings will pull more curvature, in which case your strings will have more space to spin in the middle, but they will also, the action here will feel higher. So going back to that question, how much do you need? You can play the guitar with a flat, almost dead flat neck, probably a dead flat neck. You can't play the guitar with a neck that's slightly backbowed in that direction, like a hump. If you do, the notes here won't play. They'll hit off the frets in the middle. So if you ever start suddenly hearing notes in the first half of the neck stop playing and they choke out, always suspect your neck has slightly changed shape, and it only needs to change a tiny bit from flat, usually in a different weather conditions, to slightly backbowed, and you lose these. So if that happens to you, like after I've sent this setup back to you, then that's what you check first, and you do the check by holding down the string at the first and last fret, and you'll very quickly know if it's changed shape, because when you do that with the guitar up this way, you'll suddenly find there's no space there at all, and if there's no space at all, you can pretty much assume that you're either backbowed or you're on the verge of it. So you want to create a little bit of space. As we said, this one's too much for my liking at the moment. If you have very uneven frets, you can't lower, your action will be constrained, and also your flatness of your neck will be constrained, because as soon as you lower the overall action at the bridge and the nut, and or you take the neck flat, you are challenging the condition of the frets. In other words, you have to have well leveled frets to play with it. A very low action, and B, a very flat profile neck, flat relief curve. So the flatter you want it and the lower you want it, the more perfectly leveled your frets need to be. If you can't level them, then you basically can't have it either very low, or you can have it quite low but you can't have it dead flat, because the simple reason to keep in mind is in the middle of their length, which is about here, the strings need more room to spin, particularly these lower ones. and if you're very low and you're very flat, then these are going to hit the frets quicker. Right, so how much do we set, Sam? Well, my experience is for a guitar that I'm going to set with a low first fret action and a low bridge action, or last fret as I call it, we can get away with very little relief. So I'm going to check it out. Well, do I measure it? No, I don't need to. It's too much now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hex key in here like this, and I'm going to lightly do 2 10-degree turns. I can feel it just moving. It's nice and smooth. It's a brand new guitar. And then what I do is I just pick it back up again, hold down the first and last fret, and now I've tamed that action down to about 1/3 of what it was, just with that. Now, people worried about doing the adjustment on the truss rod, you really would have to struggle to break it. And people who say, oh, don't adjust the truss rod on your Fender, take it to a tech, are just making, they're disempowering you and making work for techs. You could go around until it's backbowed, and then you can feel what happens to the nuts. In fact, the strings. Well, let's just do it. Let's not talk about it. Let's just do it. Okay, so let's say the weather changed, and by the way, it's very difficult to actually use the truss rod at all without touching the edge of the hole here. The key they give you touches the hole and the rim of the hole. So you do get a little bit of scuffing, but there is not really a way around it. So I'm putting quite a bit of crank on this now. And let's have a look. This could be you. Have we run? Oh, look, we've run out of space. Now let's have a play. Starting to get a bit buzzy down there. I'm going to do a little bit more. So the best thing for anybody watching this who's nervous about their truss rod is get your factory supplied truss rod adjuster and keep turning it like this. Now they are they're not stiff to turn, but the hex key gets a little bit locked in place sometimes, so you have to be a little bit patient and kind of wiggle it out. So that should have put enough onto the hex onto the truss rod adjuster to make this completely, or start to be backbowed. Hear that? Starting to lose those notes. Now, dead flat, or it's close to flat, but gone beyond flat, so the action looks really low. In fact, it's too low because the center of the fingerboard now is bending upwards, and it's cutting off the gap that these strings need. And if I keep on going, those notes will go dead altogether. But this thing can happen if I set you a very low action and the guitar goes to your home and you have a different central heating or whatever. Within a day or two, this tiny bit of relief that I left there could just disappear in your environment, your environmental conditions. And this is what will tell you. Up here, notes play okay. It's down here. That's the indicator to the fact that it's backbowed. And all you have to do then is you do what I've just done, is you put your adjuster in, and it makes the finish come off the edge of the hole a little bit. There's nothing, unfortunately, you can do about it as you turn the hex key. What I'll do is I'll move the strings a little bit if I can. Not that easy either. And we'll get this in and we'll turn it, wiggle it, lock it in. The important thing is to get the key firmly fitting in the hole. One of the things, the only real way you'll damage a truss rod adjuster is if you don't get the hex key in the hole, and if you start kind of cranking it without it being correctly fitting and firmly in the hole. So that's just something common sense to be wary of. Okay, so now I've got a tiny bit of space. I reckon that's about 1/10 of a mil or 0.2. That's just what I want. Now, the tuning's gone off kilter again. Now, I'm going to proceed on a slightly different basis here. I'm going to go ahead and set this up without the, to begin with, without the, what's the word? Without the tilt on the back. I'm going to set it up as a down-only tremolo, and the reason for that is if you're going to do this work on your guitar or any other guitar, I recommend that you do your setup work with it set to down only if you have this kind of tremolo. And the reason for that is it will reduce the number of variables. If you're trying to do setup work and you've got this floating thing which has the impact on your strings and the the tuning kind of stability, then it just adds another thing into the mix that you could do without. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw in the claw until the plate is pulled back down. So I'm taking out the upward bend potential by screwing in this claw. Now, they really, this is another area to be careful because they really make these not very well designed, this bit Fender Leo, when you made this thing in the first place. You've got a screw that's impeded by all those other bits. And so what we're going to get is, notice I just checked the lift at the back. For the sort of standard tuning, I'm now going to keep going until this locks off and puts the plate of the tremolo flat on the deck. And then we'll have a bit of tuning stability. We're pretty much there, a tiny bit more. Now, if let's say I email you later on and find out that you want it set up floating, then I will reset that afterwards. There's a little tiny bit of backwards play, but it's more or less hard-tailed. Okay, so having hard-tailed it, I get a more stable platform to work from, and I can gauge and guess, calculate the playing actions much better. So let's have a look for this guitar as it's currently set, what the height is. I'll take this, use this for marking, scraping bindings on the guitar neck. I don't need it right now. So we've got now 1.75 on the low E. This will have lowered a little bit now since I have hard-tailed it, and we've got about, again, 1.75 on the high E as well. Now those are higher than it needs to be at that end, but before we make any adjustments, let's check with the action at that end. Let's check what we've got in terms of the first fret action. It doesn't feel too bad, but I suspect it's about, that was 0.4. Suspect it's coming in at about 0.5 of a mil. Now 0.5 of a mil is verging on the high. It's just over 0.5, but let's call it 0.5 for good measure. That's into the zone of higher than I would like. And why does it matter? Because when you have an action of 0.5 and above over the first fret, what happens is notes pressed here, fretted around here near the nut, tend to go sharp. They don't always go sharp, but they tend to. So getting the precise, correct first fret action does two things. One is that it limits the likelihood of notes played here. Hear how it goes sharp when I press. Now you can make the guitar note go sharp by pressing it hard anywhere, but it's not in tune. But the higher the first fret action is, the higher, the easier it is to go sharp, and you don't want it. The other advantage of getting the first fret action as low as possible is that chords played down here suddenly feel light and easy. So, okay, so we know we're too high there, and we've got the right amount of relief in the neck right now. So why am I not going to cut the frets down first? Because if I do, the larger variable that I'm going to take down kind of, if you think of the, I often think about this as a triangle, and it's technically not, but you get a bit, your eyes can get a bit crossed if you leave behind the triangle. If you think of it as a triangle, you've got nut, bridge, and neck. And when you have a certain action height here, then you could call this, that's the biggest variable, and the action down here is the smallest one. So the point being is if you change a fair bit there, it reduces a tiny bit there. Make sense? Of course, it isn't that shape. If we get technically correct about it, it's a curve with a certain height there and a certain height there, and then a thing between the two of them. So call that a triangle? No. But the principle still applies. A bigger change there, or a gross, when you make a fairly big change there, you get a smaller change there. But they're interrelated, obviously. Equally, if you flatten this out, what will happen is this distance will change as well if you flatten your neck out a bit more. So those are the three components, really. The three primary components of your action will be your, what I call the will be your first fret action, your last fret action. We're calling that the bridge. So the bridge is there. We'll call this the last fret action. And then the third piece is the third component, major component, is the curvature of the neck, which has an effect of changing the feel of the action more towards the center. But those are the three main things. And as you're seeing is that if this one is the gross one, we do this one first in terms of numbers. We do that one second because it's a grosser variable, and then we follow up with this one third, which will be a tiny adjustment. And quite often what you'll find is that adjusting the action down at the far end, bridge end, always Wales creeps its way into it, adjusting the action at bridge end will lower this down, and suddenly we might be in the right place. So let's get on. We've got the neck in the right relief. Let's now take the small doofer and let's go from my common target, which is 1.5 on the low E. And is this an American? No, it was a Mexican. Has it got time? It's got the miniature. No, hang on a minute. You can't have a hex key that doesn't work. Are you kidding me? They are not. No. That would be quite silly, wouldn't it? My God, they really have. Pointless. You wouldn't be able to adjust your saddle. Way to go, Fender. Right. So let's take this down to the 1.5. So I'm going to just take down about a half a turn. Let's see where we get with that. So that's a bit contraction too low. So what I'm going to aim for is 1.5 across to 1.2 and a spread therein in between. So how do you know that? Well, you go 1.5 and then you go fractionally over 1.5. How much? Well, just a hair's breadth. Now I can see that it's lower than it was, and this one here, the D, is way too high. So the D saddle is way out of kilter for this radius. Now people sometimes say, why aren't you using a radius gauge? Well, if you think about it, I'm measuring up from the existing radius here. So if I measure, I'll just demonstrate it for the critics because I like to use visuals. So they say, how come you're not using radius gauges? And I'll say, well, you know why? Because if I'm following an existing, there's my radius, look, there's my actual neck, and my strings go across it like so. Right, those are my what are they? They're the strings, right? That's the last fret. We're looking at neck down the neck head on, and what we're saying is, oh God, we want on the low E we want 1.5, and then we want just under 1.5, and then we want a fraction under 1.5, and then a fraction more and a fraction more until I've exaggerated it, right? So you see what I'm going to get? I'm going to get, oh God, can't control this pen. I'm getting a slightly offset curve, right? But it's following, it's working off the underlying fret. So it's following the radius. If I did it all the same height, it would go like that, and it would copy the radius perfectly because it's measuring up from the radius that exists. But because I'm nipping away at it and coming lower on the high E, then it becomes a kind of slightly tilted curve. Get what I'm saying, don't you? So I don't need to put one of those fancy radius gauges across it because it don't make any difference to me because I'm still following the radius and it's copying, or it's working, it's referencing the existing radius, which we already know is 9.5. So I can just do it from there. That's why you don't have to have that little gauge either. So on the D we should be, I think we should be now just dipping on 1.5 or fractionally below, and that's just about it. This one is way over as well. No good reason for that at all, just badly set, and it will just make it less playable. So this will be under, just a tad under 1.5, and it's still too high. So if we anything, we could say 1.4. Now you could say, how do you get that in reality? Because it's so tiny, you can't measure it perfectly. So I can see that's slightly over 1.5 still. So I'm just doing it bit by bit, and then I'm going to do by eye the next one, and follow it up by measuring it. And I want to end up at 1.2, and that's just now a tiny bit under. Come on. Thank you. That's 1.3-ish, and that one's too high, so come down with this one. Whoops, not up, down, I said. And the radius, sorry, the intonation looks a bit wrong too. So that's just under, that's 1 millimeter exactly, so tiny tweak, we should be there. Right, now the next thing I do is I look across it in a kind of rolling radius way, and this gives me just a hint of where things are fractionally off, and I can just literally smooth it out like that visually. It's an experience-based thing. So now I have the correct height here as measured, referenced off the last fret height. Now I'm going to tune using our tuning fork and relative tuning. See how much lower that one had to be? Same with this one. Great. Now we check the new height over here, and we want 0.3, and let's see what we got. We got over 0.4, which is cool, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to set for 0.3, and I'm going to now get my little fret files out, and we're going to just tweak each one. That's a very delicate little operation because these are very tiny adjustments. So we're going to go for the this one is the 17, which is the yellow one, and we want to go, we're going to go these and then these, so we want to get down to 0.3, and it's nearly there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim to do it in such a way that it widens it sufficiently as well, so we get rid of this risk of the pinging thing going on. Now I'm watching it, looking at the dirt in the slot, so I know I haven't gone lower at the front yet, so I'm widening it. We've still got space, and what happens is once I get to that front edge and I basically tilt enough, I want to be doing it with a tilt backwards, and as soon as I touch the front edge, then I'm sort of nearly at the last bit of adjustment. But this will help it stop it pinging. So we're still over the 0.3, which is fine. Make sure you're on the right side. And here I go into the height. Now I can see it touching the front edge, and now I will be taking it down, if any. So there's still a little way to go, and it is very, you have to be very careful not to overcut. Now I'm looking at this, and this one still has a fair way to go. Fair way. So don't over stress this and don't over attack it. You don't want to go down too quickly. You want to get it to where it sort of goes and starts to choke out or buzz out. But at this level of adjustment, you can get there a fraction too quick, and it feels like nothing's happening, and you sort of want to push a bit too hard, and before you know it, you've overcut. We're almost on the mark now. I can see it by pressing down and see how much it goes down. So you can see I'm taking all of this time just on a single slot, but what I can tell you now is the slot will be cleaner and wider than it was before, and it won't be pinging. And the pinging is what puts your guitar out of tune, because along with the lack of or failure to stretch out the slack, the pinging is the pressure differential building up between one side of the nut and the other, and then releasing as you bend the note or as you put the tremolo on, and it releases often with a ping, and that will guarantee you, that ping will almost guarantee you that your guitar will have gone out of tune. Now I'm still not getting there with this one note, so it's taking a fair bit of time, and again, like I say, it's a sort of challenging point because you start to want to push harder. Almost there. I could stop there because we're so nearly there. I'm being kind of pedantic, maybe. That's interesting that this is cutting very, very, very slowly, if at all. These are good files, so it could well be to do with the fact that this could be a Corian nut. Now I've cleaned the slots a little bit here. Sorry, the teeth. Okay, we should be about there. You see, the nice thing is we're still playing the note. We're very close to it. But you want to get it as spot on as you can possibly get it. And there's nothing wrong with spending the extra time. That's pretty good. So that's the first one done. Now we bring the string back on and we go for the next one coming outwards, which is the 13. And what I'll do is I'll clean, just de-gunge any teeth on here as well. These Hosco files are very good. I've had them a couple of years now. Now this one's almost spot on, just a little bit higher, but what I'm going to mostly be doing here at this stage is just pushing through to widen this slot. So again, we tidy up any friction on the sides. Once you're sure of this, unfortunately you'll still get pinging from the metal string tree. It's a given. That's what metal string trees do, which is why I prefer the I prefer the tusk ones. So I'm very close to being on the mark here. Again, you can get enough experience to do this by eye, but having a feeler gauge is just one way of being absolutely sure. And the spending the time, you can hear that little pinging noise as the string goes through the string tree or pulls it side to side. And you notice each time I'm just double checking to make sure that I'm on the right side of history. 13. So temptation is to lean forward, lean sort of towards me and get further, cut the front down further. Of course, if you do that, you run the risk of flattening out the slot, which is a no-no. That will lose you the tone of the string. So if you've got to cut it down, you have to be cutting it down with the backward slope on it. So sometimes it takes longer because you're having to take down the back of the string, the back of the nut as well. That's pretty close. Now here we are onto the high E, and again, when you get familiar with it, you can sort of see the difference in the gap. Now, because Tom hasn't had this guitar in his hands and got used to it, the changes in this action that I'm making now are more or less going to be they're not going to be tangible to him because yeah, he wouldn't have played it first and then go, wow, it's changed. But you know, it's okay. It's here to be as good as it can be before it gets to him, and that's my job in this case. But from a setter upper point of view, it's often much more satisfying when it's a much loved and much played guitar that somebody sends to me, because every improvement is immediately tangible. Because they've lived with it the way it was before for so long. So this one's, again, taking the same amount of time. Same. So you can see we're 3 strings into the game and it's taking its fair time. But as I say, better to take longer and make it work than to go too quick and screw it up, because the alternative is you have to fit another nut, which in this case would be a bit of a pain because I have to cut out the original and so on. So I think we're right. I can see we're spot on there. Right, now I'm going to pull the 3. Now the other thing about this pushing it straight through and locking off is that you don't have enough room to pull the strings off to one side when you want to do something like adjust the fret, adjust the first fret action. So could do without that. So a bit of extra wrap would be good. Now that one, I'm going to leave that the way it is because, well, no, I'm not. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to widen it slightly. What are we on? 26, 36, 46. So I'm just going to, as you can hear, it's just cutting a little bit wider than it was originally, which is great. That will help the movement of the string through the slot. So in many ways the lowering of the action down here has helped to open up, lower the gap down here as well. Again, I'm just going to widen the slot here rather than cut it down. And these files are made that they cut on the bottom, but they've also got a, I don't know what you call that, sort of rough edge down here that cuts as well. So it will do that widening job as we come down. That's good. I might want to technically go a tiny bit low with the other ones, but and here we have the low E with quite a bit of room. But again, we'll just go mainly with the widening to begin with. Now again, when you're doing slots on here, you have to be careful not to cut down into the wood of the maple behind the nut, because sometimes you don't have a choice. There's no room to do the adjustment, and it sticks out too far. You end up having to cut it because you can't make the adjustment otherwise. I think this D is a tiny bit more required. 26. Yep, that's good. Good. And Just check this shadow and the gap under here, which you can always tell it's just a tiny bit high still. Can be a little bit more time consuming to do the low E because it's a thicker file and it's cutting into more material. Right, that's happy. So review is I've got the very low first fret action the way I want it for the reasons I explained earlier. I got that last of all. Second to last was the target action over the last fret, which kept a rough copy of the radius, only tilted offset a little bit because I want a bit more at this end than this end. And I've got, first of all, was that the first thing I set was the relief in the neck. And now we're ready to level the frets. Now, I'm not going to go and play it all over the guitar to check out or test the frets because in a way I'll do that as I go, because the reason I'm leveling, as we sort of already know, is to be able to recrown as much as anything. So we're going to tidy up whatever has been done by the radius block. Now the reason I'm having to hold the strings off like this and do it half at a time is because the way they've put the strings onto those locking tuners, as we've been talking about, is they don't give me any space to slack off enough to pull the string off to one side. So I'm having to really work around it, which isn't ideal. I'm pulling it really hard. If you had that extra wrap of string, you could slack it off enough to do this without risking breaking it. So I've got that half of the frets done. Oh. Now, whether I'll be able to get these three off satisfactorily, or maybe one has to go over there. Perhaps it does. Get one over there and two over there. Right. So part of the challenge of this will be to reshape the frets, but also in the sanding out part of the deal, which is what didn't happen at the factory. Well, the recrowning didn't happen, but with recrowning and sanding out, then what we'll do is we'll remove most, if not all, of the amber coloured finish that's gone up and over these frets. I mean, it's not a bad job, but again, it's a sort of, it's a profit-based thing. Okay, so before I do the fret leveling, I'm going to set the tuning once more. So I want this as close to in tune as possible, just for the forces on the neck. Really, it's not critical to be exact, but you know, I want the neck under load. Okay, so now we've got everything the way I want it. The action is set up perfectly how I want it. It's my target action, and now typically on normal guitar, this fret leveling part of the process now would be about making the frets comply with the action I've chosen, as opposed to the normal experience we have, which is that we have to adjust the action until the frets we've been given play without buzzing. So normal, unless we do this kind of work, we are our playing action is dictated by the condition of the frets. And here you've noticed that we've set all the action first, and then we come back to make the frets do what we want, and in other words, for them to play with this chosen action. And that's the nice way around. It's we're in control of it. And of course, I'm saying any of this because I've got experience of knowing that this chosen action at both ends and with the neck relief, I know that an electric guitar of this type will play perfectly well with that kind of action. If something else changed, for example, this had a 7.25 inch radius, a tighter radius, I would hang back from trying to go so low. I would probably stop at a 1.5 on the high E side, because I know that the geometry of the tighter radius it doesn't allow us to get to the same actions. Well, we can get to the same actions, but you tend to lose your high bends, high E bends, because the geometry doesn't permit the strings to ring cleanly, and there's just a simple geometric reason for that, which is hence I say the geometry. And there's nothing you can do to get around it. You are limited by that, full stop. And it's important to recognise that, because if you don't have that experience, you can find yourself trying to level yourself out of a bag. That's fine the way it is. Now we're going to do the B. From lots of experience of using this method, I can also tell you what's good about it is that it tells me the condition of the underlying frets. And in this case, judging by how it's cutting, I would say that the radius block leveling they've done in the factory is effective, because it's ended up with the frets mostly being, I would say, mostly being even. There's a little bit of high spot in the middle, and the reason that may be there now that they didn't get when they did it, because they did it with the strings off, right? And that's a difference there. When you do it with the strings off, the neck is not compressed, so there's an element in the way the neck changes shape slightly when you load it with strings that doesn't happen when the strings are off, and therefore when you're leveling frets with the strings off and the neck not under compression, it's a slightly different shape. And so if you want it really accurate, I suggest that you level it, as I'm doing here, with the strings on and the neck loaded close to the playing load, and that will bring the neck into a slightly different shape, which is a tiny bit more accurate. And it's not massively more accurate. Their radius block leveling will have done a pretty thorough job of leveling the frets out, but it just goes to show that you can see some of the technical differences that make one method a little bit more effective than the other. But it's not so big of a difference, he said, speaking Americorn. It's not that big a difference to crow about. It's just an observation that it is a little tiny bit different. So I'm just brushing the loose dust. Now I'm going to check the playability of those individual notes. All mostly good, except there's a tiny little bit of fret slap, I would call it, in the middle here, which I'm just going to, around the 12th fret actually, so I'm just going to do a little bit more leveling, and I'm pressing down a little bit on that area. That's all I'm doing, just a tiny bit more with a little bit more pressure. I mean, I'm being perfectionist here. That's actually a very good sounding set of notes anyway. Now what we want to check is the bends. So that 12th fret there, that 12th fret is 12th fret on the G track where the G lives, and you can see that that's just slightly choking out on the big bend. So what I still want to do is to free that up, so I'm going to recalibrate to get this thing as close to the right shape as possible. It's a tiny bit over tightened. These adjustment amounts are so minuscule, but I'm just going to line it up, and then I'm just going to concentrate on that 12th fret and the G track, and that's what it tends to be, the G track, which is the area that you get any choke out if it's going to choke out on the big high E bends. And so just getting that area leveled out a little bit more tends to just free you up in that bend. If it doesn't, if you find yourself stuck, then you can always make the tiniest upward move, and a tiny upward move in the action tends to free that up. But I prefer to stick with our target action to begin with, and then level it out. But part of the judgment call is to know when, I've done a bit of adjustment, it's not freeing it up, therefore I'm not going to expend any more fret metal on trying to free up that particular bend. What I'll do instead is I'll raise the E saddle very slightly. So now I'm on the D track. Great thing about this leveling system method is that it takes care of what I've sort of defined as the two different kinds of fret buzz. There's a cluster there in the middle which are a little bit higher, so that's probably the compression causing a little hump in the neck. Not such that you could see it, but the beam sees it. The beam sees all. Nice. Yeah, so the reason this is such a good method is that because it levels, well, so its purpose is to, or the innovation of it, I suppose, is to level with the neck under load. And to get the neck under load properly, you can't just have a jig like Stu Mac has that bends the neck with pistons and whatever, because that's okay. I mean, it changes the shape of the neck, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't pull the neck from end to end the way that strings do. So you're missing the longitudinal compression bit. So this method, because it centers around leveling with the strings on, it also incorporates that compression, and because it has the strings on in order to get that compression, the other nice part about it is that it allows you to do what I was just doing, which is to play it, to test it, and then it's the only method where you can stop leveling exactly when you hear the note that you're chasing has freed up. So that's why you set your action all up exactly as you want it, and then it's not bad. And then you level it, work it until it plays beautifully, and that's what we're doing here, getting grubby in the process. So once I've done this last calibration for the low E track, we'll level that out, and then we'll get on to recrowning. Now the challenging part of that, and the next bit, is finish is a nerve-wracking thing. Mexican Fender clear finish on maple boards has put the willies up for me, because there have been periods in manufacturing history in the Mexican plant, I don't know exactly when or why, but for some reason they've had adhesion problems with the finish. And so on some maple neck Mexico Fenders, you can get yourself all lined up to polish the frets out using the usual low-tack masking tape, and before you know it, the whole lot of the fingerboard finish is coming off, flaking off in great big handfuls. And unfortunately, if that happens, there's nothing you can do about it, because it's not your fault. Wow. It's not your fault, it's a problem in the mix. Put it in the mix. And on the unfortunate times when that happens, you are basically left refinishing the darn thing, which nobody wants to have to do. Typically I would end up leaving the front of the headstock on normally and doing everything else again, but it's horrendous. It's a very big additional burden that you can't pass on to the customer, but it's a really a downer for Fender's process to cost me a week of looking for a spray window, getting that done, buffing it, sanding it back, buffing it, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, having to re-polish the frets and go through the crowning process again to get rid of the... Because of course, if you have to refinish this, then you have to do it over the frets as well, which is not my preferred method, but you don't really have a choice if it's been done that way the first time. Because a better way, in my experience, a more slicker looking way of doing it is to do it over the... do the finish part first, get a lovely gloss fingerboard flat, and then put the frets in on top of that. Of course, the challenge with that is that it's much easier to muck up a gloss fingerboard when you're fretting on top of it. And so doing it the other way around leaves that sort of... It can run into those adhesion problems, but it also is better from Fender's point of view because, in a way, what would you call it? The polishing becomes the last thing on the sort of quality production line, and it can go out the door looking like it's just been through the buffer, which makes it feel a lot better, or look a lot better. Right, so now let's have a change of scene, change of view. Let's have a look at a couple of frets. Where are they? They're about there. Right, I'm going to mark them all up first. I'm remarking them with pen, and this is going to help me do the recrowning part, I should say. So the important thing is when you recrown the fret, think back to that diagram on the board, you're taking a flattened fret and you are creating a new arch shape with this single point of intonation right at the top, and you're creating that arch shape out of the existing material of that flattened fret. And this concave crowning file is what we use to do that, and it's very effective, and it basically, the concaveness of it wears down the side of the flattened edges part of the fret, and gives us back that nice rounded or arch shaped thing. So let's zoom out there we go, start there, and we'll move as we go. Right, so I'm going to use the medium jumbo size, and so I'm going to run this down here. Perhaps I'll do that instead. Hello. So I run the this file up and down. Now what it's going to do, as you can probably see, is it's cracking off some of the finish that Fender didn't take off before. So hopefully it's going to do it neatly without causing any flaking on the fingerboard, which is, God forbid. Now it's most of it off, but you can see it's made quite a bit of a mess. Not a mess, but it's cracked off quite a lot of that stuff going up the side of the frets. But that's Fender not doing it for us. That's not very good. Well, maybe if we zoom in closer, you can probably see what I'm aiming to do is I'm aiming to round off the edges and leave, if you see the sort of shiny bit, we want to leave as thin as possible a strip of marker pen down the center of the fret, which you can just about see in the light there. So that's the target outcome, and that little black line down the center tells us, oh, it's gone dark, this picture, tells us that we've reshaped the edges, but without hitting the very top of the peak of the fret, which means we haven't negatively changed or adjusted the height of that part of the fret. So the retention of that little black line of marker pen, I don't know if you can see, but it clogs that up pretty quickly. Thanks, Fender. I mean, it is a bit of a joke, isn't it, really, when you think that, realistically, they're making Tom pay to clean up those frets to a point where somebody, you can actually use a file on them. So, he's paying, him and his dad are paying good money. Now I can feel straight away when there's paint in the way, and this is skipping over it and shining up the finish, and in a second now it will crack and sort of fall off into flakes. I have to keep cleaning diamond coated part, but it's worth it because we're getting a nice cleaned up fret. But it's actually taking longer than a standard guitar neck, which hasn't had the frets put on in this sequence, put on and then thingied over, sprayed over. So that's kind of why I'm against it, because as you can tell, I'm having to tidy up the detritus, and it really does make a stinky mess on the inside of that file. Could do without that Fenders. Thankfully, this tool is pretty hard wearing, and I can get a good clean up without removing its abrasiveness. But anyway. So I hope you've all been well over these last few days, weeks. I've been busy spraying recently. I've got all these left-handed Firebirds to do, and they've been taking a while to get all the body spraying colours, sunbursts done on the neck. Also, one of the necks, the scarf joint, started opening up, just sitting there. Decided to give up the glue, decided to give up the ghost. And I was able to glue it back together again. And because I'd glued it back together again, I had to then effectively refinish 90% of that particular neck to make it usable, which I did. But hopefully I suggested to Andrew that he gets a spare from the manufacturer, because first of all I shouldn't have had to have repaired that neck, so that's it's an extra time, and I had to refinish it separate from all the others, which is a whole pile of extra spray. So there's a cost involved, and I think they should send a replacement, and I think we need to hold on to the replacement in case it happens on any more of them, because that's a bit of a confidence denter, I would say. I hope it doesn't, because that's outside of my control if they're badly made. But anyway, I would hate it from a point of view that Andrew sells these on to his customer, whoever that might be in future, and at some point the neck comes apart. Of course, there are aspects of it which I have no say or control over, so which is the basic quality of structure, the gluing of the neck, for example. So I'm just working my way back to you, girl with a burn. Somebody's going to do me on YouTube. That was a great song from the 70s. Oh, my little news is I'm no longer in the band. We're no longer heading towards the booze cruise that we were hoping to do. This is the band that got together for someone's wedding, and we were kind of keen to keep going, and so a lady who joined us on keyboards for the wedding put us up for doing their school booze cruise, which sounded like a good idea. A nice, friendly audience, kind, forgiving drunk audience, always the best. But interestingly, it just hasn't. The vibe hasn't gone right, and one or two people have got very nervous about whether we can make enough progress to be in a good enough state to do it. And I think nobody wants to be stressing out, and we would have needed to have practiced a couple of times a month as a minimum to get tight enough to do it. And I think when you've got 6 people getting 6 people together once a month is really difficult. Working people and busy people. So that just was looking really difficult. And actually, I still don't think it would have been enough. Once a month wouldn't have been enough time together. So it sort of all folded in we had a rehearsal last week, and I thought it was terrible. A keyboard player couldn't make it; she was double booked, and I thought it was I was terrible. Couldn't seem to play anything well, and I think everyone went off a bit, either demoralised or something, and it didn't really survive more than a couple of WhatsApp messages after that. So it's just, there we go. But I have to say, in my bones, I think it's the right thing. So these things always go the right way. Sorry, I hadn't really thought about the camera angle. You see how hard it is to do this with all this finish clogging this up. It really is an absolute. Actually, you know, the longer I'm spending on this, the more of a pain it actually is. I'm really having to work hard to cut through this. It's absolutely ladled on, and it's thoroughly gumming up this tool. It's something you don't have to do for most other guitars, other than that people who've made theirs this way. So you know, that's why I don't like it, Fender, or the fact that you didn't do this part of the job yourselves. You left it for me to clag up my tools, scratch it. I mean, you know, you can see it cracking all off there, and I'm giving it a bit of a extra push at this end, the flat end. But having it all come off there like that, there's absolutely no real reason why it would stop there and not come off the surface. I mean, that's what worries me. It's a potential. I wouldn't say likelihood, but there's potential for it to cause it to separate from the fretboard, which you absolutely don't want. So I just think technically it's a poor process. And I'm having to work quite ferociously to get this crispy stuff off. You can hear it flaking off, actually. This is a flatter one, is actually a better way to do it, but I'm nervous about taking too much off in one go. So you can hear it? And then it's... God. Bits everywhere. Yeah, I'm nervous of it coming off and falling off the fingerboard. So I'm constantly having to clean both ends of this thing. Anyhow, so that was my latest. On a very plus side is today I set up the hammocks ready for our spring. It's a very important moment in our year. It was a lovely day today, and I was able to can't get around this one very easily. I was able to I bought a load of string a month ago. Rope. We've always had this blue nylon rope last year, so I wanted some green, more environmentally friendly looking rope anyway. It's not any more environmentally friendly, it just looks better. So it's a green paracord, that's the stuff, 8mm paracord, and I've doubled it up, so we're absolutely no doubts about its ability to support my immense weight. Anyhow, sorry about the view, it's terrible, I know. Look at all these bits everywhere. I mean, it's absolutely filthy. Right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom out. I'm now going to mask off the whole of this fingerboard with masking tape, low tack masking tape, and this is going to take a little while to do because I have to cut the stuff up into smaller and smaller bits, and I will probably go off camera at that point while I do it, just so that I can put something on and relieve the mind-numbing boringness. So what I want to do is, once this is taped up, I want to sand out this and then polish up the frets through different grades of sandpaper. And again, that's pretty dreary, so I'll do that off camera. And once I've done all of that, these are nice and shiny, I'll come back on and celebrate with you the fact that none of this fingerboard came off. He said fingers very much crossed. So we shall get onto that, and then I will be back. And then what's coming up in the workshop? Well, I have got an interesting project from an old friend by the name of Olaf, who I did my master's degree at the same time as him in goldsmiths in London back in about 1995, and I didn't really ever see him after that. Once we finished, we went our own ways. And anyway, he got in touch with me just the other day, saying he had some guitars he wanted me to do some work on. I guess he must have found me along the way online somewhere and been liked the approach I was taking. So it looks like he's going to be sending me 6 of his very special guitars from Luxembourg, which with all the with all the expense of packing and couriering, which is no mean feat. Since Brexit, of course, it's been nigh on impossible for anyone but the wealthier people to afford the kind of courier prices and the added customs shenanigans anyway. But Olaf seems to be going to send me these guitars, and apparently there's a challenging and curious set of jobs to be done on all of them. So it's, by all accounts, it sounds like it's going to be very interesting and challenging, which I like too. So that's good. I'm holding off on Joe's multi-scale bass because I haven't heard back from him on the materials side of things. I emailed him a little while back, and I know he's studying, and I think I'm not the kind of person who's going to follow up. If when somebody knows the pace they want to work at, I'm going to leave them work at that pace. It's fine by me. I'm not in a rush. But what else is there on the game? Oh yeah, and the thing that happened yesterday or last week, which was a real had me panicking a bit, was I sent Adam's Grace build up to him, and I sent it last Monday and should have got there Tuesday. No sign of it. Said it was tried to deliver but didn't, but Adam had been in all day, and he'd had deliveries from Amazon but absolutely nothing from Parcel Force. So anyway, this went on day after day all through the week, and there was no sign of it basically. According to Parcel Force, it went back to the depot every day. There were a couple of lame attempts at excuses why, like no answer from customer type of thing, and eventually I had to ring them and a couple of times and say, well, what the hell are you going to do about it? Because it's clearly a problem if it's actually on this van, then this driver is, I don't know if he's not finishing his round and just knocking off for the day and leaving stuff in the back of the van or what, but it's not getting to its destination, and that happened 6 days in a row or 5 days in a row. So over the weekend, nothing. Called them first thing yesterday morning, and I spoke to a nice lady, but I have to say she wasn't the brightest thing in the world. She was trying to be helpful, but she didn't really take on board any of the things I was trying to get her to understand, which is how she kept saying, "Oh, it will be delivered today," because it said so on the tin, kind of thing. And I'm like, well, it said that every other day. Do you see how that's not going to give me much confidence? Oh yeah, but it will be delivered today. Yeah, but why? You said that every day for the previous 6. Oh yes, I know. I'm sorry about that. It's like, no, can't you understand that I need you to you need to have a better understanding of the problem. Anyway, despite being thoroughly unsatisfactory from the point of view of feeling like I had spoken to somebody who even vaguely recognised the problem, the thing got delivered yesterday, on Monday. The annoying thing was, I said to her, "Can you not call the driver and say to him, there is this thing, it's at this address, the guy is there waiting, here's his phone number." She said, "No, I can't contact the driver." It's like, what? And I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's what we're supposed to believe. Nobody at Parcel Force can contact the driver to update them when there's a problem like that. So I said, well, I think she said she could send him the phone number, probably. Oh, I forgot to cut down the middle of all of these. Oh, blast. Hang on. Sorry about this. Anyway, yeah, so that was unsatisfactory, and somehow we're supposed to believe that he literally can't contact their driver. It just doesn't seem very likely at all, does it, to you? Anyway, and it's, by some strange reason, it got there yesterday. So I was very relieved, and I tried to say to her, "Look, I've used Parcel Force for 8 years or so now for this guitar stuff," and I said that I've maybe, I don't know, between 1,000 and 1,500 sends in total. I don't know, something like that. And I said that in all of that time, I've had so far 100% no damage, no loss record. With a combination of you, Parcel Force, doing it well, and me packing well. And I just said to her, that should be worth a lot, especially when, I constantly or regularly go into forums where they're all slagging Parcel Force off, and I can use my numbers to say, actually, it isn't that bad. Look at this. I've had no losses and no damage, no stolens, no brokens in all this time. So, actually, people who are, what's the word, winding each other up that Parcel Force is so terrible, you can't deny these numbers, and it's, it does suggest that it's mostly down to packaging. Anyway, I said, I enjoy putting the, rebalancing it when I get the chance. I said, but I don't want it to lose this 100% record. You should be more bothered about it, to the point where even if the thing says, "Oh, you're not supposed to phone the damn driver. You've got a reputation at stake here, one that's actually hard won after all this time." Well, guess what? She didn't get the importance of that in the slightest, which of course people who are at a certain level often just don't get. They're just people who take the phone calls and they go through the motions as best they can, which is a shame, really. But anyway, I don't think it's through any particular thing she did, because she didn't sound like she had any real means of effecting any change other than hoping that it would be delivered today, with no real sense of why it would be if it hadn't been the other 6 days. But and somehow it did. So I really had a nice experience of being able to go to sleep not worrying, knowing that Adam had got his guitar, and it was if I may say so myself, it was a great guitar. I really like that guitar. I thought it was looks fantastic, plays great. So I was very, of all guitars to lose, not that one. Anyway, So it was a great relief to lay my head on the pillow and think, it got there, thank God for that. Would have made another one, would have remade it in one shape or form, but anyway, so this is the sort of boring bit about putting all the tape on. Some people, well, not with the maple boards, but I watch people do this fretwork stuff on other YouTube channels, and often they do the thing with whatever that. When it comes to the sanding part or polishing out the frets, they just often get wire wool, and they just go over the frets with the wire wool, and they go over the rosewood as well on a rosewood board, and it's like the whole thing done in one go. So that's really weird. I'm not sure. It's an okay finish if you do that. Your rosewood sort of goes a uniform sort of dulled colour, but I still always mask off the rosewood to save it from the wire wooling. This piece of wood here I'm using is absolutely beyond its sell by date. It's pulling little strips of the melamine stuff, whatever it is. The white stuff is coming off now, and it's just getting in the way. I really have to get a different piece of something, but it really could do with not being this stuff that shreds the way this does. I can't think. I mean, a piece of the best material would be a piece of bleeding marble, but that's going to the extremes. So in the meantime, I suppose a piece of hardwood that didn't, this white melamine stuff doesn't come off. That would be better, but I think all I can safely say is that this material's had its day. Anyway, right, so I'm going to go off camera, have a drink. What am I going to have a drink of? I can't remember. I brought water and coffee. Yeah, so just the sort of jobs on the go. I've got Nick's 7/8 scale Strat build nearing completion. Got the finishing done on that, which is great. So next stops will be fitting all the hardware and start to get it together and wire it up. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay, I'm going to go off camera, do this bit, which is the whole polishing out thing, and get on my bits of paper, and I'll see you afterwards. Right, it is time to put on your somethings and dance the blues. Now, first of all, we've got a loose strap button there, which I caught it. Damn you, get out of my way. Right, we've got a loose strap button, and we've got a stain that I want to get rid of. So let's put this strap button under a bit of pressure. Okay, now let's get a little bit of cleaning fluid onto this cloth. Now, I've done my very best with these frets, but I've stopped where I've stopped with them, because what I don't want to do is cut into the fingerboard at all, and that's what you have to probably do to get the last little bits out. So I've left it. I've stopped where it's safe to stop, because I can't afford to take the risk of busting off some of the fingerboard finish, and that, along with the whole of this extra work to kind of make them look half decent. That's a real. I know that Ben at Crimson Guitars did a review, or here's what I had to do to make this guitar playable on one of these Meteoras, and I think his thumbnail, or his kind of clickbait, no, his title of his video was something like the worst frets he'd ever seen. And that for somebody with his experience to say that is I think it's quite damning actually. So I think that despite this being a beautiful shaped guitar, the pickups are pretty good by the looks of it, and there's a lot of range of tone to use, and the neck feels nice. I just think this spray over finish, I can still, it just upsets me still to see this material here, but like I said, I literally can't get this off without risking damaging. Well, I sort of can with my damn fingernails, but it's about the only way. There's too much of a risk of cutting into the fingerboard, I'm afraid. Yeah, so I think that's just a terrible example of this way round, and I think would I suggest that they do it the opposite way round, which is to polish the board first and then fit the frets? Well, honestly, if you want a quality feel to a guitar, yes is the answer. Simple as that. Right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get a bit of that's a reasonable close-up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I fit these strings. So line up the thingy, and I'm going to go through here like so, all the way through, tight, and then back about a fret's worth, and then I'm locking it off there and yanking it up, and then I'm going to just go around. Now this, you can see this is creating about a half a turn on the post, and I want that half a turn. So, and you'll be grateful for it at some point in the future, Tom, I promise you, when you have to come to slack them off and you don't want them to instantly break on you. That extra centimetre wrapped onto the post will be a godsend, I promise you. I'm just going to make sense to line all of these up first. Right, so yes, what's on tomorrow? I don't know what's on tomorrow. Oh yes, I know what's on tomorrow. So tomorrow and for the rest of the week, it's going to be Firebirds time, because I've got all of those 5 to put together. So there's a bunch of sort of batch things to do, like all the cavities to be shielded and stuff like that. So quite a bit of stuff to do. What I'm going to get here is something to speed this up a little bit. Yeah, so Firebirds it is, and then Nick's 7/8 Strat as well. And for fun, if I need a bit of a downtime, I've got the white Partscaster Strat to go. This will be another one of mine from leftover bits and pieces, with the aim of making as good a player as is possible from humble beginnings. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to set this one up as a down-only tremolo at the moment, and then I will check with Tom, and if we want it as a full float, then I'll do that at home, which will be just as easy to do from there as from here. But the full floating tremolo is a very particular thing, and it brings a number of problems for somebody if they're not used to resetting up the guitar after. So for example, if you want to stop using the full float, it has an implication, or it has an impact on the action of your overall action on the guitar. So if you end up going to disable the full float and you want to have a down only, for example, you have to be prepared to reset your action, lower it, because the act of floating it sends it up by the action up by about 0.5 millimeter. So and the other way around as well. If you start out with a the action down and you want to float it, then when you float it, you'll raise it by another 0.5 millimeter. So you need to set your action with the tremolo as down only, get your ideal playing action, do the leveling and so on. And then before you float it, you go and set the action down on every single string down by 0.5 millimeter. And then that wouldn't be playable at that point probably, but then once you've raised it up through the floating process, you will find that it goes back to its correct position. And it just happens to be 0.5 millimeter. Isn't that lucky? About. But what you don't want to be doing is adjusting the saddle once you've floated it, because adjusting the saddle changes the tension, adjusting the tension changes the float, and you'll be chasing that equilibrium point forever and ever. So what I'm doing here is I'm just grossly, shall we say, getting the strings bedded in, and then I'm going to do a fairly thorough stretching. So there's the basic setup. Everything's gone back to where it was before, nice and low. Easy to play, but what we're going to do here is we're going to take the strings and we're going to stretch them with thumb and forefinger to eke out as much of the slack as we can. These are 10s, so if you go to 9s, be careful on the upper 9 string, the high E, because it's all too easy to break while stretching. Also, if you didn't put this extra 1/2 to 1 whole loop of string onto the tuning peg the way I've done here with your locking tuners, if you were to do some stretching straight onto the strings that went, if you put the strings on straight through and clamp them, even doing that bit of stretching can cause them to break, because you're pulling directly on the clamped bit. So you've probably heard me say loads of times before, and your dad certainly has, tuning stability has nothing to do with your tuners. It's everything to do with your slack left in your strings, and the other half of it, let's imagine it's half to do with the slack in the strings and the other half is to do with the nut slots. So we've got a tusk nut here, which is good. We've got the slots now correctly wide enough and set to the correct low first fret action, so there's no notes playing sharp at the nut. So we've taken care of the nut, all of that part in the tuning stability, and now I'm stretching out the strings fairly thoroughly so that we take care of that other part of it. Now, of course, you haven't had this guitar before, so you won't know the from and to of the tuning stability, but it wouldn't, by default, no guitar will stay in tune if you haven't done the nut properly and if you haven't done the stretching of the strings. Those two things, doesn't matter what price point. So all of that slack coming out that's making it go out of tune, that would come out while you're playing it if I didn't stretch it out now, and if you didn't stretch it out each time you change the strings and put new strings on. So you've got to go through this process if you want the thing. Now, I don't know, if you're new to guitar, you might not mind sitting tuning it that much, but if you're an experienced player or you're a paid player, session player, or you're in a band, the last thing you can afford is a guitar that won't stay in tune or goes out of tune as soon as you start playing it. And so you'll find with age and experience and seriousness of music, the thing that you seek in a guitar will switch from being the looks, the brand, the boutique name on the pickups, and eventually it become the one that stays in tune. The one that goes into tune easily and stays in tune when you play it, and that will be the one that you go to all the time. So any guitar can be that guitar. Does that sound like an ABBA song? Any guitar could be that guitar. Any guitar could be that guitar. You just have to do these things, what we have done to it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to check the intonation, the final step really. And I have to, because of the way they've set this up, I'm going to have to lift this up on its not even enough, is it? I'm trying to keep it from pressing the jack on the floor. Stupid thing. Right, let's put it into bridge pickup, fully. Okay, so what we're looking to do is tune the guitar to the pinged 12th fret harmonic of each string, and then fret the 12th. They should be the same note. This one's ringing a tiny bit sharp, but they're very close. That one's sharp. I can see it's too far forward. So that's pretty good. That's on. That's too far forward. Good. So I'm trusting what I just saw and the setup. So the setup is wrong from the factory. It's just casually, lazily done really. So it's not conforming to the standard 2 groups of 3 staggered. It's trying to, but that G is far too far forward. It should be behind the B. The D, A and E are sort of in the right-ish place, but not quite. So we will adjust them. Let's find the best gripping thing we've got. How grippy are you? Are you too big and not grippy enough? Yes, you are too big and not grippy enough. Let's find another. Find another. That is. These are straight Phillips. No, not Phillips. They're straight tuners. Straight. No, what's the word I'm looking for? Straight screws. They're not nothing fancy, but they've got to be the right size, or else you very easily mess them up. Okay. So for this, I'm going to detune the G string to make this easy to adjust. And I'm going to pull it back into its correct position. I'm also going to slightly pull back all of these bottom 3. So it's quite, you really can trust the position. The 2 groups of 3 staggered is the way to remember it on this kind of guitar with 3 wound and 3 plain strings, and there's about 1 millimeter between each one, so you can do it. If you get the 1 string sorted, you can pretty much grab the rest of them. Now this one is just about on the mark, but any more back than this and I would need to be cutting the spring, which, you know, again, a bit of a pain to have to do. You really ideally wouldn't want to start a brand new guitar at the limit of its thing. That's not a perfect set up. So what I'm going to have to do now is go back to tune up Now obviously the thing's lying on its back for a minute. The tuning will have changed because I've moved the saddles for a start. So then I quickly tune up all of those, get me block again. Sorry for this rubbish view. I don't know what you can see. Yeah, you can sort of see a very zoomed in useless thing. I'm just trying to keep that jack socket off the floor. No. Spot on. Spot on. Good. Mm-hmm. Noticed that you've not heard any pinging as I've been doing any of this tuning. Yay! Perfectly intonated. That's because the nut has taken care of any of the problems of the strings catching in the slots. So there's no uneven tension, no friction building up. So there we have it. Set to down only at the moment, and we're done on the setup. Little polish at home before it goes in its case. It's got a few little sort of watermarks on it from hanging up wherever it hung up in the shop, but it's in pretty good condition. Again, the only thing that still remains annoying is the frets, where there is still some little bit of stuff, but it's much better than it was, as you can probably see from the close-ups. You see that? Far better than it was. There's a tiny little bit here and there creeping up the side in one or two places. Actually can't really see it from here, but I know it's there and it annoys me, but I don't want to scrape any further. Beautiful looking thing, great pickups. I think it's all good to go right now. Intonated properly. As you can see, that's intonated correctly there, and that's a full-on crunch. In an ideal world that would be better cut down a little bit, but it's fine. I don't want to have to take the string off, waste one of those undos. In another day in the future you might want to cut the spring down a tiny bit, but it's not critical. Okay, so the last and final thing, last thing is to put the plate on the back, wherever it went. Where did it went? There, hidden behind there. And obviously I'll take this off later. It's building up dust already. It's like electromagnetic. Well, it is, isn't it? It'll attract dust just like that. So we'll just put this back on. We'll have our thingy set to thingy low. It's not the right one. It's that one we want. Set the torque right down. So yeah, we'll set it as down only, and if we're going to do it otherwise. Now I've taken all the plastic off this, and I'm going to do it for this back plate as well, just because plastic is hard to get off if you don't. And I took the plastic off, but I took some of the screws and I took the knobs off and whatnot to clear up the plastic, because often people, when they get the guitar with the plastic on, it's all nice and stuff, but the minute you pull it off you end up leaving a ton of it behind. And it's horrible. It goes underneath the pots and whatnot. I say that twice now, whatnot. I say it again, and so on and so forth. Right, so this is clean. It's going in its bag, and it will be as new as it possibly can be. Now, when you do this, if you use an electric driver, hold the screw carefully up and do not allow the screw or the screwdriver to fall away. people say, oh, I never use a screwdriver, power driver to do that. You can, but you have to be prepared and careful. Once it's in and going, you won't have a problem with it falling off. It's when it's standing up tall, it can tip over, and then your tip of your screwdriver is falling off onto the finish or whatever. So just be thorough and careful. Support it until it's going in properly, and you'll be fine. Silly thing by Fender to put the wrong mini hex key in there. So I'm going to take this off too, because it's a messy looking thing. I'll get rid of all of that. And see, it's caught a bit behind there, which we don't want. And the only little downside was this minuscule little bit of, I don't even think I can, it just I know it's there, and I know it's there, and I don't think I can even probably make any positive difference. Maybe I can, just the tiniest bit difference. There's a tiny little lip right there, and that's driving me nuts. Yeah, that's much better. Not perfect, but it's better. Little details like that really annoy me. Okay, so we're done. This is going in its bag. Ne'er again to touch a human hand. I will put the hex keys and whatnot. I can say it again. The hex keys in the front pocket. There we are. On the chair safely. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. See you all again soon.